Coming up, the national champions and the SEC champs begin spring practice tomorrow. All eyes are going to be on the quarterbacks. We'll talk about them next, right here on SEC Country Live. Hello everyone, it is good to be back. My name is Brandon Adams. This is the former Alabama All-American Mike Johnson. Glad to be back for another week of SEC Country Live. I got to tell you, I really missed being here last week. I really missed it.
Well, I can tell you right now, the people have spoken, and I think a lot of the people missed you being in that seat.
Oh, that's nice to hear.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people are ready for BA to be back in the driver's seat.
Maybe some of y'all start being a little nicer to me then. How about that?
I can definitely, hey, listen, it'd be nice to me after last week, but, we definitely had a lot of fun, but glad to have you back.
So I'm raring to go after a week away. You're raring to go. The 78 won all three stages in Sonoma yesterday, so your favorite driver wins. You're feeling good about that.
Yeah.
And with that, we can probably be off and running here on SEC Country Live today.
Yeah, I think a lot of good things, a lot of big things happened for a lot of SEC fan bases over the weekend, so it should be some good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to start, though, that I'm number one on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list, and that is the fact that tomorrow is a big day on the SEC spring practice schedule, and then a couple of the champions in the SEC's conference champions and the national champions, both Alabama and Georgia, will begin their work for the 2018 season with spring practice tomorrow, and both these teams somewhat similar in that quarterback's going to be a big part of the conversation that goes on. At Georgia, it's the incumbent starter Jake Fromm and the incoming freshman Justin Fields, who was a five-star prospect for the class of 2018. In Alabama, you know the story here. Tuatungo Vailoa would seem to be the favorite after taking over for Jalen Hurts in the national championship game, but Hurts, almost 2 full years as Alabama starter, is no slouch job here. He's still going to probably be heard from as well. I do think, though, there may be one thing you could say about the Georgia job, at least with some confidence, that I don't think you can say the Alabama job. Yep. That is, you can make maybe a little easier to make a strong opinion. Here is Chip Towers, who covers the Georgia Bulldogs for DogNation.com, on Dog Nation Daily this morning, saying here is what he thinks is going to happen with Georgia's so-called quarterback competition. Here's Chip.
Jake Fromm looks great. I expect him to play great. And while Coach Smart and everybody's going to talk up the competition standpoint of the quarterback position, I don't think anybody's going to be able to wrest this starting job out of Jake Fromm's hands just based on what we saw from him last year, what I'm seeing from him now, what we know about him from a football aptitude standpoint, and then just a work ethic standpoint. I just don't think it's going to be plucked away.
It's obviously the person trying to do the plucking there is Justin Fields. Before we get to the Alabama part of this, do you agree with Chip's assessment of Georgia that, no matter how good of a prospect Fields is right now, the idea of unseating Jake Fromm as the starter, barring injury, is the kind of thing that's just not likely to happen?
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit last week, and my feeling is this, and it continues to be this way about Jake Fromm. Jake Fromm has already crossed the hurdles that you need to cross if you're going to be a freshman and you're going to start in the SEC. How much did we talk about last year about his mental game, about his ability to get in the film room, about his ability to prepare for games and practices and game-like situations, his ability to be a leader, his ability to step into the huddle and do certain things that usually freshmen don't do, and Jake Fromm was that once-in-a-generation type guy. All things aside, and all credit to Jacob Eason for the year before, Jacob Eason was handed the job. Jake Fromm was not. Jake Fromm went out there and did those things. He had that competition factor. He had his back against the wall. We've seen videos of him practicing during spring break. So I think Justin Fields is great. I think he's got all the ability in the world. But if you're going to tell me that back-to-back years we're going to see true freshmen make that impact, he's got to cross that stage mentally for me first instead of just physically, and I think that's going to be tough to do.
And the fact is, Fromm had a much better freshman season in 2017 than Jacob Eason had in 2016. So if you make the comparison, it's a little bit easier for Fromm to beat out Eason. Now, it happened largely because of Eason's injury in Game 1, but it's a little easier for Fromm to beat out Eason in 2017 than it would be for Fields to beat out Fromm in 2018 because Fromm averaged nearly 10 yards per attempt last season. His completion percentage on balls deep down the field was almost 50%. Not to say anything of his 60+% completion percentage overall. He's just a more accurate, more engaged quarterback as a freshman in 2017 than Eason was going back to 2016, which would make the challenge for Fields all the tougher.
Yeah, I think it's tough because I think there's actually kind of a lot on, in my opinion, there's a lot on Kirby Smart's plate as well, because don't you have to try to get Justin Fields on the field at some point? I mean, isn't there some kind of pressure? And Greg Steele actually says it in the comment section. He thinks Fields transfers eventually. I wonder if there's not pressure in some sort of situation to say, I don't know that we can redshirt Justin Fields this year. He is the #1 overall quarterback, or whatever you want to call him, coming in. Is there pressure on Kirby Smart to get that done? I think that's a question to answer.
Yeah, so I want to talk about the Alabama quarterback thing here in a moment. Their spring practice starts tomorrow too, but as far as your idea of it being an imperative that you have to get Fields on the field, I understand where you're coming from on that, but I think that if you're Georgia, you can approach this the same way Alabama approached Tua and Hurts last year. Say, we've got two good quarterbacks. We're not necessarily sure how this is going to play out. We're going to be open to whatever happens. Right. And I think if you're Kirby Smart, that's the one thing that you have to be – that's your one have to. You have to be open to allowing anything that happens to play itself out. It's one thing for me to sit in this chair, Chip Towers on the phone, to say, Jake Fromm's not going to beat out he's not going to lose the job to Justin Fields. That's essentially just expressing opinion. It's another thing for Kirby Smart to be closed-minded to that possibility. I think the imperative here for Smart is to be open-minded to whatever happens, allow itself to play itself out, whether it be a guy inserted because of injury, a guy inserted because of ineffective play or whatever. Yep. If you're Kirby Smart, you want to build the biggest and best roster you can and then just sort of let the chips fall where they may.
I agree. It's almost like, you hear people say things are day to day. This is week to week basis. I feel like I understand that Froms will be the guy going into the season, and I think Froms is going to run away with the job. If you want me to be honest about it and be frank about it, I think this is Froms' job to lose by a mile. But you do want to see that Kirby, I feel like, take that approach week to week and be open to anything. No matter what happens the week before, say, boy, Justin Fields looks good this week. Let's get him an extra rep in the game.
Let me go to the Alabama side of this for a moment because I think it's an interesting comparison. We just heard Chip Towers, a guy that knows Georgia very well, saying, here is what I emphatically believe is going to happen in the Georgia quarterback situation. This is Fromm's job. It's only going to be Fields in moments when Fromm's not in the game. This is not a thing where he's going to seriously push Fromm. Is there any kind of emphatic statement like that, one way or the other, that you can make when it comes to the Alabama quarterback job?
My only emphatic feeling about the Alabama quarterback job is that Jalen Hurts will be given every opportunity during the games in the fall. I think everybody sees it as this kind of black and white race, and I think it's understandable to look at that way because Nick Saban has that track record. But I think that during the fall, Nick Saban will do everything in his power to make sure Jalen Hurts gets some type of meaningful snaps, at least in the first 3 or 4 weeks, because I don't think things play themselves out before then. I think you take this all the way to the end of fall camp. Maybe Tua gets that first snap of that opening game against Louisville, but I would be shocked if at some point during that opener you don't see Jalen Hurts in the first half.
Cynthia Giannini in the comment section, kind of along those lines, says, I like the dual threat quarterback plan for Alabama. So you say that you want to get Hurts involved. That's going to be a key factor for you, making sure that he feels enough a part of this process that he doesn't look elsewhere, decide to transfer. But how about for two quarterbacks who are so different? Is there a way to play them both for significant time for almost the full season?
I think it's going to be interesting to see Michael Locksley, actually the new OC, approach that, because I think he's got his work cut out for him. I mean, when you look at what these guys both bring to the table, I don't think there's any doubt in a lot of people's mind, having seen what Tua can do, having seen what Jalen can do, that Tua has the higher ceiling. But you got to remember what Jalen does in specific situations. Look at his rushing touchdown. Look at his throwing touchdowns. Look at what he did against LSU. Look at what he did against Mississippi State. I think there's a role for him. Defining that role is going to be up to Dan Enos and Michael Locksley and everybody else on that staff to be able to try to find a way that's almost calculated. In this situation, we will bring in Jalen. I think it's up to them to figure it out.
Couple comments here before we move on. And by the way, thank you all for the kind words in the comment section. I really do appreciate that. It really is fun to be back today. Chad Robinson says on the Alabama situation, Tua can throw a little bit, Hurts can't. There is no discussion, LOL. And I'm a dog fan, so he's saying that as sort of a neutral observer to the Alabama situation, that it's clearly supposed to be Tua's job over Jalen Hurts. But the point that I've kind of made before is Alabama's going to be such a big favorite in almost every game this season. Even the season opener against Louisville, they're like a 30-point favorite. They'll be a huge favorite in every SEC game, with the exception probably of Auburn at the end of the season. They'll still be a relatively sizable favorite in that game. It can almost be like a U.S. Olympic basketball situation where you could play either guy, play him equal time. It's not going to really hurt you in terms of wins and losses that much. I mean, in some ways, Alabama may have a little bit more freedom than some other coaches do in this situation because there's no huge penalty for picking the wrong quarterback.
Right. You do wonder about all the quarterback competitions going on. Look at Texas A&M. Look at Kellen Mond and Nick Starkel. That kind of has to be ironed out. We've talked about Florida quarterback competition a couple of times last week during some of these instances. You're right, though, because the surrounding cast that these guys are going to have on offense at Alabama is going to be incredible. I mean, they're loaded with offensive linemen. They're absolutely loaded with wide receivers. With Damian Harris back, they are loaded at running back. So it is kind of listen, let's put the quarterback on the back shelf for now. In these first few games, you shouldn't have to let those guys really have to go to work.
Michael Meshke says Hurts should have transferred. His playing time is numbered now. Put yourself in Jalen Hurts' shoes for a moment. And it's a kind of an unfair question, but this is what we do. Do you think if Hurts does stick around for 2018, he'll later regret not transferring when the window is open to go somewhere else and start that clock towards being eligible to play in 2019?
I think it's interesting, but from my perspective right now, I don't know that Jalen really has a future as being a quarterback in the NFL. So, yeah, listen, do you want to transfer somewhere else? I think there's also the opportunity there that if Jalen leaves and goes somewhere else, I think the opportunity still lies that he loses the quarterback competition wherever he goes. I don't think he's handed a starting job anywhere. So I think he could also regret that decision wholeheartedly. I think it's a tough one to make. I don't know what decision I'd make if I was Jalen Hurts. I don't know what he's being told, but I think it's really kind of a coin flip whether you would regret it or not either way.
Going back to Georgia for a second, Greg Steele, who's a Florida fan, on the idea of Fields transferring, he says, does Fromm leave to the NFL next year? No. So Fields doesn't start next year also? He says a transfer is coming. Listen, while I think it's unlikely that Jake Fromm would be a first-round pick in the 2019 draft, you can go to WalterFootball.com, which does nothing but mock drafts. They've got Fromm listed, at least the last time I checked, as a first-round pick in a 2019 mock draft.
Right, it'd be 2019, spring of 2019.
Yeah, spring of 2019. Like so he shows up in the first round of a 2019 mock draft as is right now. So for Greg Steele, who says there's no way that Fromm's leaving after 3 years, I mean, that's not necessarily a guarantee.
It's hard to really look into the future 2 years from now. And actually, I mean, listen, there was people saying that about Jacob Eason last year. We talked about Jacob Eason and his Heisman odds. We talked about Jacob Eason, possible first rounder. Has Jacob Eason done enough? I don't know. Let's pump the brakes and let's slow this thing down. We're only going on year 2 of SEC Country Live right now, so let's kind of bring that back into perspective. Who knows? Who knows in 2 years what you're going to get out of Jake Fromm? But that still, to me, leaves the door open. I think that adds pressure, in my opinion, to Kirby Smart. Do you try to redshirt Fields? I don't think there's another backup quarterback option. So, at some point, if Fromm does get the majority of the snaps, you do wonder where that leaves Justin Fields, if it leaves him in the same predicament as Jalen Hurts.
All right, speaking of Greg Steele, let's talk about his team, the Florida Gators, for a minute here on item number 2 in our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And some of y'all that are glad to have me back, you may not feel that way after this topic, because honestly, you got to tell me what I'm looking at here, because I don't quite understand all of this. So we know what the big story is for Florida this spring. They are beefing up that strength and conditioning program. They're getting faster, they're getting stronger, they're getting more athletic. And the narrative coming out of Gainesville is, after like 6 weeks, you can already tell the difference. Now, you spent a lot of time in the weight room. I mean, how many times after like 8 weeks of doing something, you're like, you know what, my whole body's completely changed?
Yeah.
Well, that's what Florida's trying to push here.
Yeah.
So we'll let the pictures do the talking for them. You can judge for yourself how transformational brand new strength and conditioning coach Nick Savage has been with Florida. Let me start with Jordan Scarlett here, and the Scarlett numbers are actually pretty impressive. This is Jordan Scarlett on Twitter. Left side is the before picture from January. Right side is the after picture from March. He says he's gone from 199 pounds to 210 pounds. His body fat's gone from 7.6% to 5.2%. I also think it would be funny if he his height's 5'10". I'd love it if he's like, and now I'm 6'2". I'd love it if he just did the whole thing. I mean, the guy on the right does look a little bit better shape than the guy on the left. The body fat stuff, I mean, that's actually pretty impressive. That's really been done. 11 pounds of muscle added in a couple months. You're going to give Jordan Scarlett some credit here, or give Nick Savage some credit for what he's done with Jordan Scarlett?
I'm giving Nick Savage all the credit. And I got to tell you, B.A., listen, this is a topic that has come up with tough. I think I've said the name Nick Savage more than I've said Barry Odom, more than I've said Mark Stoops, more than I've said a lot of head coaches in the SEC when it comes to spring, because I think the talent on the one deep for Florida is there. I mean, I've said this a couple of times. When you look at the one deep for Florida, I feel like the talent is there. When you look at that offensive line, when you look at the linebackers, when you look at what could possibly be their DBs and their secondary, the talent's there. So to me, Nick Savage could be the underlying factor in Florida really, really making that return this year. So I'm giving him all the credit. Now, I have been involved in these situations. Let me go ahead and show you how this goes. When they get in there that first time, boy, they pinch all the fat. They get all that body fat. They come back. It's just, it's just an easy little
Well, it's also that deal. Can we see another one of these, too? Because you also have, look, before and after pictures are a staple of magazine ads my whole life growing up. Let me see the next one here. So that's Jordan Scarlett. Let's see here's Juwan Taylor. Now, the situation with Juwan Taylor is, I don't know if we can scroll up and see the whole thing here. Okay, so for Taylor, we don't really get a lot of specifics for the other guys we saw body fat gone down this much, weight gone down this much. All we see is the before and after picture for Juwan Taylor, and it's not really that different. I mean, how much of an impact is he making than Jawan Taylor if we're not getting some specific numbers here?
I think that either way, I don't know what the before tells you, and I don't know what the after tells you. But the after picture with him, this guy's 330 pounds. This guy's 330 pounds.
So you're impressed with the picture?
I am impressed with the picture of Jawan
But is
Taylor.
the thing for like the before picture, like you always see these in, like the weight loss ads where the guy's like sticking out his stomach for the first one, kind of sucking it in.
They're definitely all flexing and after.
Are the two pictures that different? He's smiling in the one, or like growling, flexing. The other one just sort of standing there. I mean, they're not that different.
No, listen, I'm telling you right now. Because here's what happens. These guys have been working out for the last 2 months harder than you could possibly work out, harder than you think you can work out, working out to vomiting. I mean, going to the training table like they never have before, running harder than they've ever thought they could. So, and given a 2-month span, yes, you can make a huge stride in what you look like. But I think given these side-by-side pictures, I don't think those pictures are that great. I don't think they tell the whole story. But I'm extremely excited for the Florida fans out there getting this level back up to where it should have been all along under Jim McElwain.
Let's go through a couple more of these here real quick. We'll see a couple more of the Florida guys here. All right, here's Trey Grimes. So he goes from 210 to 212. His body fat goes from 15.4 to 13.2. That seems like a rounding error to me. I mean, it's just like maybe if you checked your math the first time around, maybe you got the same number. Maybe it's just like a little bit different computation. I mean, he's looking good right there. But it's not that different.
Yeah, it's not that different. He's definitely flexing in both of them. But, I mean, listen, I just, to me, the percentages tell it all. And I'm not saying that I'm going to look at these percentages.
And the body fat's a hard thing to do. Don't get me wrong.
But I think
as someone who's got plenty of it.
I think given the situation and given what was before this, I just think it's right for them to be excited about it. I think it's very smart. By the way, I think all these graphics are a little bit the same. I think it's very smart on the part of Florida to say, look what's happening down here in Gainesville. This is what's changing about the program.
Rick Keene, who's a Florida fan, says the transition translates to better play on the field. Yep. I watched the practice, and they look a lot faster and more agile. We're actually going to talk about those open Florida practices later on in our show, but I believe we have another one of these we can see here. All right, here's Nick Smith. Once again, the whole point of the campaign is talking about how different things are, but you're not getting any numbers for Nick Smith. It's just him standing still in one and kind of giving you sort of a half-hearted flex in the other.
You got the lighting's different too. Do you notice that? There's like a light coming down.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, like I've actually had photographers tell you this before. Like if you want to do like a guy with his shirt off in a photography deal, you got to get that like real stark light to get inside and show those muscles there. You're right. The lighting is completely different. I feel like this campaign could use some work. Am I wrong for saying that?
I think it's well placed. I think they're talking about all the right things. I think they're talking about all the right things. I don't know that the pictures actually deliver it for me. Maybe you wait 6 months. Maybe you get through that summer program and then you bring that around. Hey, here's what Nick Savage did in 6 months. I don't know that 6 weeks, I don't know that 8 weeks is enough time to really capture that turn.
All right, Morgan Recting's got a good comment. I'm going to be fair here. He says, BA, come on. We put more work in under Savage in 6 weeks than we did under Mack in 3 years. They finally put an emphasis on strength and conditioning. And here's what I'll do to be fair to Florida on this. I do think it's really true that that's one of the things that in the SEC a program can slip on really fast because a lot of this stuff really is technology related. It's how well do you crunch data? How well are you keeping up with the most recent trends? And if you've got a bad strength and conditioning coach, it's sort of like it can become a really bad strength and conditioning program before you have a chance to realize it. So I know this is one of those popular talking points for new coaches. Hey, we're improving our strength and conditioning, but most of the time, bad teams do need to improve there. So from that standpoint, I'm going to give Florida, a chance to actually build this back up because bad teams typically are not great in strength and conditioning.
Yeah, and here's my last point on this. And obviously, I think we're going to talk a little bit about Florida's practices here in the second half of the show. But the talent and the one. Now, I'm not going to say the depth is there at certain positions right now because we've talked about Jim McElwain's recruiting. I don't know if it is, but tell me about Jabari Zuniga. Tell me about C.C. Jefferson. Tell me about Martez Ivey, Jawan Taylor. Tell me about all these guys all over the field, and then imagine them getting 10% better and coming in the weight room. All of a sudden, Martez Ivey, who gets a little bit lax later in the game, who can't really run a 2-minute offense, all of a sudden he looks that much better. I'm telling you right now, be aware. If this team can stay healthy, they're going to make some noise just out of that weight room deal.
Charlie Jones says, BA, keep hating. I can't wait to see them hit some people this season. Charlie, you know where this is all in good fun. We're glad to have you this year on SEC Country Live today. We're happy now to move on to item number 3 on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. We take a look at the LSU Tigers here for a moment. I thought that Nick Suss had a really interesting line at SECCountry.com. We've obviously paid a lot of attention to the quarterback situation with Lowell Narcisse and Miles Brennan, that crew there. But Nick says that he thinks the running back competition at LSU might actually be this spring a little more interesting. What Nick writes is, to put it plainly, the LSU running back competition is far more interesting than quarterback. Why? Because there's an immediacy to it. LSU coach Ed Orgeron won't give any of his 3 quarterbacks an inch in the competition. Every time he's asked, he says all 3 are about equal. But at running back, Orgeron gives a status report after every practice. And then in that same piece, Nick Suss went on to sort of describe about how, one day it's one guy, one day it's another. And, while I'm not following the LSU practices as closely as Nick Suss is, I kind of understand where you could be coming from on this. And I believe that's probably true that, for all of us here, whether you root for LSU, you root for Georgia, you root for Alabama, whomever you root for, there's this thing of, in the spring, can I just get some actual information? Can I just learn something about my team? And for most quarterbacks, you don't get that. But for Orgeron at running back, who has been pretty forthright for that, good for him. And I kind of understand where Nick Suss is coming from.
We talked a little bit last week. Ed Orgeron had an interesting comment, and his comment was, we don't have a feature back right now. And until we can find a feature back, we're going to throw the ball. Because, listen, you and I have kind of operated off this feeling that they're going to throw the ball because they have so much talent at wide receiver, because they feel good about Miles Brennan, because they might be good in pass protection. I got the feeling from Orgeron's comments last week that, hey, maybe just somebody hasn't stepped up into that role and been up to the level of a Darius Geis or Leonard Fournette, or going back to any number of backs that you've had as a feature back at LSU. I don't know. I don't look at this list of running backs and Nick Brissett and obviously Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Tay Pruvens. I don't know that I look at these guys and think, man, feature back. So it's going to be interesting to see what comes out, and I am keeping a close eye on it. This competition and the Auburn running back competition, in my eyes, are going to tell a lot of the story of what's going to happen in the SEC.
But there's a huge difference for me between Auburn and LSU. Some of y'all are cracking me up with this Florida weight room stuff on the comment section. But there's a big difference between Auburn and LSU. I'm going to give Auburn some credit to say their running game is going to stay very similar to what has been in the past, given the fact that for the most part it's the same coaches who are putting all this in place. It's still Gus Malzahn's team. But the transition from what was Cam Cameron's team to a year's worth of Matt Canada, now to Steve Ensminger, Les Miles transitioning to Ed Orgeron, I don't know that same level of running back productivity is a guaranteed return. I'm assuming that it's LSU. They're probably going to be fine there. But there is a lot of turnover. There's a lot of inconsistency there in terms of the guys who are putting all this in place. So can I say for sure that Edwards-Helaire is going to be the next Darius Geis or the next Leonard Fournette? Not with all the changeover. I don't know that you. I don't know that you cleanly pass the baton at LSU the way that I assume you're going to at Auburn, because for the most part you've got a lot more coaching consistency.
Yeah, and I think that's what's scary for LSU fans. And I don't want to speak for LSU fans, but I start to match things up. And we've talked about this a couple of times in talking about different position groups. The offensive line they're experienced, but they're young. And then all of a sudden you look back there and say, do you have a feature back? Well, guess what? If you don't have a feature back, can you lean on your quarterback? Is Miles Brennan the guy? Is Lowell NRC going to be the guy? So I think things get scary when you start to really dig deep into what's going on with this LSU offense. Then you add in the fact that you've got a Steve Ensminger. Boy, what are you hanging your hat on at this point? You've got a ton of talent at wide receiver, and that's really all you can for sure tell me about LSU's offense right now.
Now, speaking of a forthright at Orgeron, he's not only forthright on his running back situation, also how his wide receivers are playing out this spring. He did a recent interview with the official site there at LSU, kind of gave us some insight on how he thinks his wide receivers are playing so far this spring as well. Here is Coach Orgeron.
Their releases, their footwork, Justin's very smooth. Stephon Sullivan's a big target, a big receiver. But also Terrence Marshall, that he's looking good out there. Then we signed Jamar Chase and all our young receivers, Keenan Jones, Jeray Jenkins. We're going to give those guys all a chance to compete.
So I think it's kind of interesting. The one name that you don't hear from Orgeron there is Jonathan Giles, the transfer from Texas Tech. And this is where I think sometimes some of the LSU fans who watch our show every day think I'm a little hard on the Tigers for 2018, and I may be down on them too far. And some of y'all may correct me when I'm proven wrong on that during the season. But here's one compliment I will give to Orgeron. It was a year ago that I was on this show every single day saying the one thing that Orgeron's doing really well is acquiring transfer talent. Braden Fehoko, who's going to be eligible to play 2018 on the defensive line. Jonathan Giles, who's going to be eligible to play 2018 as a wide receiver. Acquiring that transfer talent was going to pay big dividends on the field this season. There's some areas in which recruiting-wise, Orgeron's not getting it done. But he added transfers last year. They're ready to go this year. That's going to make a big difference. Giles is a receiver right there. You hear the group he's just talking about. Fehoko as well. That's the one thing I can give Orgeron some credit for.
Yeah, listen, a couple of JUCO signees on the offensive line, a couple of guys that came out and played, well early on as young signees for LSU. So I agree with you. I think he's gotten the right pieces in the right place, especially when you look at that wide receiver core. Jonathan Giles, we mentioned it last week, the new number 7 at LSU. He's going to come out wear DJ Shark's number from last year. He's kind of that explosive number 7 guy, and they've been talking about him a ton. So when you add Brandon Fehoko to that, and you talk about those two guys they get from Texas Tech, I got to agree with you. He's hit the right chord with both of those guys coming in and being immediate contributors once they're eligible in an SEC setting.
All right, a couple comments here. Eric Lane says the LSU's had great running backs for years. Problem is there's so much. I don't know if this is the same LSU it was years ago. I mean, odds are, is LSU going to have a good running game? Yes, because they recruit well at that position. But it's not a rubber stamp for me on the LSU running game.
Yeah.
Is it for you?
It's just tough for me because it's like I said, I don't know what we're getting out of any other position at LSU. It's one thing. We just talked about Alabama. We talked about the quarterback position. We talked about, listen, be it Tua or Jalen, they're kind of loaded in every other direction. They're going to have Alex Leatherwood on the offensive line as maybe a backup. They're still going to have Jonah Williams. They're going to have Ross Pierce-Baker. I don't know what else you're hanging your hat on as far as LSU's offense goes. I think their defense is really in for it when they start the year. You look at some of the younger guys they've got in defense as well. I think their defense to open up the year really is going to have to carry this team until that offense can find its stride.
Cliff Nelson says Edwards-Helaire is going to be performing well. He's hard to tackle at practice. We know how good our defense is. That's well said by Cliff. Chris Taylor agrees. He says, ride the Clyde, which I think is a great line.
Tyler Mann brings up a good point, too. They're looking to add the transfer cornerback. We talked last week about how thin they are at the quarterback.
That's the kid from Stanford,
the kid from
right?
Stanford.
Yeah.
I can't remember the guy's name.
I
said it a million times
but he's from
last
Stanford,
week.
though, right?
Stanford and the guys from New Orleans, so it seems like it'd be a perfect fit. And if they don't have that, and we talked about Alex Hickey, I think actually wrote an article about this last week. If they don't get that guy from Stanford, they're looking at struggling to play nickel next year. One injury, and they could be down to really being in their base defense the entire year, and you wonder how that could affect them moving forward. It could be tough for them.
Hardwired over on YouTube, Hardwired to Self-Destruction says, don't sleep too much on LSU. That is a warning a lot of folks have given us here on SEC Country Live. We'll heed that as we move on into the 2018 season. Let's do item number 4 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And there was a story we talked about not all that long ago about Jeremy Pruitt trying to build a fence for his own state when it comes to recruiting there at Tennessee. Not just around the entire state, but around one town in particular. It was the town of Memphis. He said that to a Memphis group of Tennessee boosters back on signing day. Let me show you the quote here from Jeremy Pruitt, what he said at the time. He says, Memphis is going to be our city. I can tell you that right now. We're going to be here as many opportunities we can get. We're going to get our guys up there. This is going to be a priority for us. Not letting anybody get out of Memphis. No one is going out of Memphis. Well, a big 4-star defensive end from Memphis has made his college intention known. He put it out there on Twitter. Bill Norton, the 4-star defensive end from Memphis, has committed to the University of Georgia. Now, put aside the Georgia thing for a minute on this. Is it a bad situation that Tennessee has lost another 4-star prospect out of its state to another school after Jacoby Stevens left the state of Tennessee to go to LSU, T. Higgins left the state of Tennessee to go to Clemson, Cade Mays left Knoxville to go to Georgia? Yeah. Is losing Norton to Georgia a big deal for Tennessee?
Listen, when I saw this news come out, and I knew, I've kind of followed Norton a little bit, I was not shocked to see this news. It just kind of like I wasn't shocked to see the Cade Mays news. It was like, you know what, I don't blame the guy for getting out of Knoxville. Here's this guy that you would think would be a slam dunk getting into Tennessee, and all the mess that's happened at Tennessee in the last 6 months, I don't blame him for leaving. And I kind of still feel the way about Norton. I'm not going to really hammer Jeremy Pruitt for this one. And because I think he's still getting his wheels spinning, I think there's still listen, this guy can't sign until December, and even if he does, sign in December, there's still another couple of months until the real signing day. So I think this is something they would have loved to have. Listen, if Jeremy Pruitt would have landed this guy, celebrations everywhere. Yeah. This is a huge deal. But I think him losing this guy to Georgia tells you more really about where Georgia's still at as opposed to Tennessee just splitting. I'm not going to hammer Jeremy Pruitt for this just
on
yet.
YouTube, Enrique Murillo says, to be real, this kid was being recruited this time last year by Georgia, so this can't fall on Pruitt or his staff. Here's my point, though, and you touched on this. Being a public commit doesn't mean that Tennessee's going to stop recruiting. Obviously, they're not. But if I'm Pruitt, here's what I want to do. Can I just get you to postpone your commitment? What are you committing for right now? I mean, early signing period doesn't start until December. The end of the cycle is not until February. just hold off for right now.
Right.
Here's the other thing that's not a great look for Tennessee. The commitment to Georgia comes off of a visit to Knoxville.
To Tennessee.
So if you're Jeremy Pruitt, I'm not saying you win with the kid right away, but can you get him to hold off just for a minute? Can you get him to, because it's not that big of a deal because it's not a signature, but it's just a little bit of bad PR for a guy in Pruitt who's trying to build up a recruiting base.
But I think my point was this. I think this still tells you more about Georgia than it does about Tennessee.
That's probably true.
I think this tells you that, listen, the guys are going to be fighting, trying to get to this Georgia program right now. Kirby Smart's going to have his pick of the litter with some of these guys, and he's probably saying, look, I need you to commit right now if this offer is going to stay out there for a guy from Memphis. If you're going to continue to go places like Knoxville, guarantee this is the message he gave. If you're going to continue to go places like Knoxville, your offer might get pulled. We might not continue to recruit you if you're going to continue to bounce around these other programs. You need to commit now. Guarantee he was like, boy, I don't want to lose that opportunity. Yeah. Let me go ahead and commit to Georgia right now. Kirby, you got me.
So real quickly on the prospect, Norton, he's listed as a strong side defensive end at 270 pounds. Do you think of him as a true 3-4 defensive end? Probably. So many of these guys end up transitioning, playing outside linebacker. This is a defensive end, though, right?
No, I think it definitely is. I think he's that true 3-4 defensive end. I think he's got a frame that you can add on, maybe 20 or 30 pounds. Maybe you get to the 295 spot once you get him in the program, get him in the strength and conditioning, get that bulk added to his frame. And I think he's got a good enough anchor to where he really fits in as one of those two-gap guys, really as the head up to the offensive tackles.
Brian Wright feeling good about this. He says Georgia's getting all those big boys out of Tennessee. He's certainly excited about that. Obviously, for Tennessee fans, a little bit of a disappointment, but we'll see how it plays out. Let's do item number 5 here now. Speaking of Tennessee disappointments, it was a tough weekend on the hardwood for the Vols. We'll make the good news from the SEC the subject of item number 5 on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. First of all, how about Texas A&M just blistering North Carolina? They gave us in Charlotte, right?
Yeah.
They're just blistering North Carolina. Kentucky's path to the Sweet 16, to the Final Four, has opened up as wide as all outdoors here. For a couple of SEC teams, they're feeling pretty good about the situation.
I was as impressed with Kennedy and the Texas A&M group last night as I have been in a while. I mean, UNC is an incredibly talented team, but what Texas A&M was able to do, I was shocked. I mean, you're talking about a 20-point margin of victory. There was no coming back. There was none of these, 20-point deficits. We're going to work our way back into the game.
Yeah,
we're going to shoot the three-ball well.
And I hate to say this, but from a standpoint of I hadn't got to watch a lot of tournament, I was hoping they would come back because I wanted to see a competitive game. And you could not get one.
No.
A&M was not going to have it.
And honestly, on the flip side, and I think we're going to go into this later, but on the flip side, Clemson did that to Auburn as well. So you had some of these games yesterday that really got out of hand. And you mentioned it. Kentucky's path opened up like the Red Sea. I mean, Arizona loses out, and all of a sudden that's the big deal. And all of a sudden Kentucky starts getting hot. And you look at Kentucky, what they have been the last month, they've been pretty unstoppable. And so all of a sudden Kentucky looks like they might be one of the favorites to reach the Final Four.
By the way, I hope your bracket's in good shape. If it's not, you can still be a winner when it comes to this time of year. I'm talking about point spreads and money lines, over-unders, even live in-game wagering. It's all available for you right there at mybookie.ag. We say it all the time. It's the place where the pros play. And, Mike, I know you like getting some action down this time of year, and MyBookie is a great place to do that because for SEC Country Live listeners and viewers, first deposit can be matched up to 50%. You're essentially already a winner before things get started.
Yeah, listen, a lot of brackets are being busted, and there's a lot of money out there to be made. And actually, Bo Molinari, Bo, I thought you were gone. You said last week you had to retire from the show. Something worked out with your work. You couldn't watch anymore. He's all apologizing to us. Monday is going to be my last day. Bo's back in the comment section. Bo, what happened? And he says his bracket got busted by the UNC thing. Can't believe you didn't have A&M beating UNC,
You picked
Bo.
against your
Be
own
ashamed
team,
of yourself.
Bo. That's not good.
Be ashamed of yourself, but we're glad to have you back.
Yeah, redeem yourself by going to mybookie.ag right now. Use the promo code SEC Live. That's the promo code SEC Live. And your first deposit can be matched up to 50%, but you got to use the promo code SEC Live at mybookie.ag. You play, you win, you get paid. It's as simple as that with mybookie.ag. By the way, in the comment section over on Facebook for a moment, Rick Keene says, now BA's talking about basketball. I have watched a basketball game before.
Listen,
I mean,
BA doesn't know. BA doesn't know. He wasn't here last week. We led off with number 1 being basketball. Record 8 SEC teams get in the tournaments.
Yeah.
Boy, there were some people not happy. There were some people not happy out there in SEC football land that showed in for their football news and didn't get any of it.
You might as well talk about politics or religion. You might as well be talking about Trump or something like that if you're going to be talking about basketball for a lot of these people.
Man.
Listen, that's why we want to keep you all as happy as we can. That's why we're transitioning back to football right now with item number 6 in our SEC Country Line First and 10 list. And I love to see these videos of guys working hard, getting serious during spring break with spring practice looming. An example of that is Jerry Jeudy. And by the way, don't you know I see these Alabama wide receivers, especially Devontae Smith in my dreams. Jerry Jeudy is another one that's going to be a tough load for folks to deal with here in 2018. Here is Jeudy doing some pretty impressive footwork. He's a great athlete. He's going to make a gazillion dollars in the NFL one day. I got to throw a flag on one thing.
Uh-oh.
Can you get your boy off the beach?
No, why?
He's gonna tear up his knee.
No, this is people work out in the sand like this. They got sand pits at the practice field.
I think it's a terrible idea. I think it's a terrible idea.
No, this is how you build up your leg strength. It's hard to run in the sand, making these cuts. It
Are
makes
you
it
serious?
tough. You'll see this like combine training. You see this. I'm literally on Alabama's practice football field. They have a sand pit. I'm telling you.
I thought for sure you'd agree with me on this because I've heard of so many guys. Like, take for instance, take it back to Georgia for a second, but Robert Edwards back in the '90s, great Georgia running back, playing in a beach it's like a Pro Bowl gimmick type thing. It's like sand, two-hand touch football or whatever.
Right.
Tore up his knee, ended his career. Because he tore up his knee on the sand. I can't have my franchise or among my franchise doing this in the sand, can I?
I'll give you 1 point on this. I don't know if the cutting is the best thing. The cut, like going in the circles, but I'm telling you
That's
right now.
all he's doing. That's
every
the point.
strength coach in America does this with sand. I'm just telling you right now. Maybe it's mostly the straight line stuff and the acceleration and kind of getting your feet going in the sand. I don't know about the cutting so much, but I'm telling you right now, every strength coach, or at least every high school strength coach, does this in America. You have the sand pits. It's like one day a month, and you're like, we're going to the sand pits, and all the football players are like, oh my God.
So sand pits are actually good for you? I thought they were an injury waiting to happen.
Listen, it might be. A lot of things have changed as far as training, at least since I've been training as a football player.
See, here's Jason Harvey. He's just like me. He's thinking about Robert Edwards. You're too young to remember this, but Edwards was a great first-round draft pick of the New England Patriots. This is pre-Tom Brady. He was like NFL Rookie of the Year, or at least, I don't know if he actually won Rookie of the Year, but he's definitely a candidate for Rookie of the Year. Pro Bowl in Hawaii. They're doing like flag football on the beach. It's like one of those sanctioned, like made-for-TV deals. Ripped up his knee, never played again. You can't have Jerry Jeudy.
But my point is this: if we're talking about a guy in the mid-90s that does this to his knees, listen, there's all kinds. We can go back for anything.
Knees don't get stronger.
Listen, there's people tear their ACLs all the time on turf, and we still continue to play football games on turf. We still put turf in every football field in America, and guys tear their knees up every day on this.
You act like this is good strength and conditioning work, but Nick Savage says if it was truly good strength and conditioning work, you'd have a before picture from 2 months ago and an after picture now.
Yes, they would.
As Bo Molinari said, hey, try one now, except open your mouth for the picture. That's basically what you'd have.
Hey, maybe so. But I'm telling you right now, I did this a million times. This was a staple under every strength coach I've ever had.
I like Teresa Stewart's idea. How about sending him over into the ocean? You get a little resistance training in there.
Might be a little like a pool workout. I used to do pool workouts.
Yeah, plus you can get like that Rocky 3 scene where like Apollo and Rocky are sort of hugging on the beach. You can get Jeudy and his trainer kind of giving you one of those little hugs.
What I want to know is where he is. He looks like he might be in Hawaii or something. Like, man, spring breaks have come a long way. Got the palm trees, got all this stuff going on. I want to go where he's at.
Chip Gromlich says, I did sand pits at Fort Knox ROTC boot camp. Hey, that sounds like incredibly hard work.
Yes, it does.
But it's also a little bit different because I'm assuming that the ROTC guys are not cutting quite as sort of on a dime.
I will say that's one of the things that really, cutting back and forth and doing this kind of scissors technique and really, kind of going all out, running the routes and stuff. That's one thing. But I'm telling you right now, the acceleration work. Listen, I never ran track, but I would assume a lot of track people do that too.
Tyler Mann says Jameis Winston trained in the ocean before the draft. He's probably just looking for more crab legs. Item number 7 here in our SEC Country Live.
Maurice Carter says, "Boy, you've been gone for a week, BA, and you and Mike can't agree on anything."
No, it's not. I feel like Mike secretly sort of does agree with me on this. I think the
No, I don't. I'm telling you.
Here's the thing,
I did it a million times.
Here's the thing, Maurice. I think that the more Mike hears my argument on this, I think he does secretly agree with me, but he can't say that now.
No, I got to go down in flames at this point.
I don't want my wide receivers out there running barefoot on the beach, not cutting as fast as Jerry Jeudy does. All right, item number 7. Let's get back to the Florida Gators here for a moment. Their first couple spring practices do take place in front of the watchful eye of the media and the fans themselves, and apparently the folks who were there like what they saw. Here's Zach Abolverdi, who does a great job covering Florida for SECCountry.com on the Florida podcast here at SEC Country known as Chomp Chat, kind of explaining from his perspective what the fans got to see with those first couple of spring practices being open for everybody to watch. Here's Zach Abolverdi.
All the buildup and everything that has been kind of looking forward to spring, it lived up to the expectations in terms of the players and how they looked, in terms of the new coaches and the vibe and the energy that we've been hearing so much about. We actually got to see it. Media got to see it. Fans got to see it. And that was another big thing that stood out this weekend was the turnout. I mean, you had probably over 500 fans there on Friday, and then double that Saturday because it was a weekend and they were starting a little bit earlier in the day. You got a much bigger crowd, and I think overall fans were happy with what they saw because they got to be really exposed to this team. They got really up close and personal with some of the drills, and then they really got to see the team in 7-on-7, 11-11 work, and the guys made some plays.
All right, before we do the Florida stuff, can we go back to the Jerry Jeudy thing for 2 seconds? A couple comments here on YouTube. Richard Smith says, I played a lot of volleyball in the sand. The sand has to be controlled and evenly deep. I don't know. I got news for you. That Jerry Jeudy sand's all over the place.
No, nobody's raking that sand for Jerry Jeudy.
Enrique Murillo also says, sand pits are great for leg strengthening as long as you don't involve too much movement on the joints. Can we all agree that Jerry Jeudy is doing the exact opposite of not too much movement on the joints? He's quick as lightning, and he's cutting back and forth 1,000 different directions.
But
Can we all agree that whatever they say is good, that's not what Jerry Judy's doing?
But still, what is Jerry Jeudy? Like 19? This guy's ankles and knees are still made of gold. I'm telling you right now, this guy will be fine. I'm telling you right now, there's a reason, and this was like from Sleeper Athletes account on Twitter right now. They're probably doing that kind of training on purpose. They probably do this with everybody that they're training these days. This is something I'm telling you. It might be different now, and I'm not old enough to be like back in my day.
Right.
But I've done this a million times.
All right, so back to the Florida thing for a moment. So Zach Alberti says folks got to watch it on Friday, got to see it on Saturday, and a good time was had by all. Open practice is a good idea for the Gators here?
I think it is in this specific instance. And I don't love it for every program in the SEC. I don't love it for every even new coach in the SEC. I think that Florida, I think what you're seeing is they're trying to change the perception of that program right now because they've been kind of that dormant, middle of the pack, type team for at least nationally for the past 6 years. And so I love it by Dan Mullen. Listen, we're going to put out these graphics of before and afters from the last 2 months, although we might not agree with some of the staging they did in those graphics. Yeah. We're going to open press. We're going to get 500. We're going to get 1,000. We're going to get maybe 2,000. They've actually opened up one, I think, this coming weekend again.
Is that right?
To try to get more people in a third time. So I don't love this for every program, but for Dan Mullen and this Florida Gators team that has the talent, that is trying to show everybody that they're getting better, trying to show everybody what these quarterbacks are doing, the work they're putting in, I think it's a good thing for Florida. I think you've got the weather down in Florida right now. This fan base is hungry. I think it's a great move by them.
Yeah, I think that, look, there is clearly a sell job that has to go on at Florida right now. I think that Gators fans themselves can speak to this a lot better than I can, but I definitely think morale was low at the end of the Jim McElwain era.
I think so.
And there's this need to sort of build things up. Now I'll admit, and this is going to sound like I'm picking at Florida. Overall, I don't want to use my spring practices for fan outreach because I only get a small number of those. And I do think the act of watching practice changed the way that it's constructed. But from this standpoint, I understand why Florida did that. And based on what Zach Alberti says in the comment we just played for you, that it did work. You got 1,000 people out there watching it on Saturday. That's 1,000 people who leave more fired up about Florida football. I heard the word on the street was that Felipe Franks performed well during these practices, that you had some energy coming from some of the other guys. And you know what? That does well to sell Florida football to the people who need it sold to them right now. Obviously the Florida fans like kind of, ribbing the other SEC fans here in SEC Country Live back and forth like we do every single day. But behind closed doors, there's some legitimate concerns. Being able to see with your own eyes, enthusiasm coming from Florida practice, I do think does something for Florida fans. So from that standpoint, I understand where Dan Mullen's coming from.
Let me go at this a different direction, too. And I think I'm speaking directly to Florida fans when I say this. I don't want to say Jim McElwain. I love Jim. I'm not so sure that he was completely honest in some of his evaluations at times. Listen, we were sold on Jim McElwain last year telling us that the Florida Gators offensive line was really going to be an incredibly improved unit. They were really going to pace the offense. They were going to provide all this protection for the quarterbacks back there. Malik Zaire looked good. Felipe Franks really looked good. This offense was hitting its stride. We never really saw any of that last year. A lot of that stuff didn't come to fruition. We saw an out-of-shape offensive line. We saw Felipe Franks that looked extremely uncomfortable. We saw a running back core that never really got to hit their stride last year. And a wide receiver core that was extremely talented, ended up doing most of their damage against bad teams. And so I think for Dan Mullen to open up this deal where, hey, everybody can come see what I'm talking about. I'm not just talking hot air during some of these press conferences. I think it's a breath of fresh air for Florida fans. Daniel
Grohl says it also shows recruits the excitement around the program. He's the top-ranked recruit on campus all weekend. I'm assuming that Daniel's referring to Trey Sanders there, who we're actually going to talk about a little bit tomorrow because of some of the stuff that Florida's kind of had going on there, trying to get in with that elite running back from IMG Academy. And listen, whatever you can do to kind of generate that energy and whatever you can do to kind of generate that enthusiasm, get people talking. It's not a bad thing. Even the weight stuff from before that I was kind of making fun of. I mean, you just got to you got to create a little bit of a ruckus, make a dent in the SEC world right now.
Right.
McElwain wasn't doing that enough. I mean, I do think Mullen deserves a chance to kind of make that happen.
Listen, I just made the comment over here on the Facebook page. I think Florida's going to shock some people with the way they play at times. Sure, I truly believe it. I think there's going to be a little bit of a listen, you're going to have your bumps and bruises, but I think they're going to shock people with how well they play. Stacey Heineman, I think, is the way you say that, chimes in and says, yeah, they're going to shock us. They're going to lose more games than they did last year. It's going to be shocking. I'm telling you right now. I knew BA would love that. I'm telling you right now, Florida is not going to lose more games than they did last year. They're just not. There's too much talent, and I believe in Dan Mullen too much as a head coach. And I'm really, maybe I'm sipping the Kool-Aid. Maybe I am. Maybe I'm sipping the Kool-Aid. Boy, they're getting back in shape. But what I saw last year was a talented team that underachieved. I don't think they do that again this year. I don't think they're as deep as they have been in years past, but I think the one deep on this team can really make some noise.
All right, let's do item number 8 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. So, look, this is one of the things in life I'm not that proud of. But I love hot seat lists.
Yes.
Like if I'm scouring the internet, I like to read college. It's my morning routine. Very first thing I do in the morning when I wake up is sort of sit down, have some coffee, and just start reading basically every word about college football on the internet. I've kind of always done that. I love doing that. Anytime I see the word hot seat in the headline, it's an automatic thing for me. I love just hot seat talk. I love saying who is, who isn't. I just like that kind of stuff. So there was a Tom Fornelli piece at CBS Sports the other day about coaches on the hot seat around the country. An SEC name was on there, but it's probably not one that I guess I would have put a lot of thought behind before it popped up. According to Tom Fornelli, Vanderbilt's Derek Mason's on the hot seat. And what Tom writes is, I don't want to say it's bowl game or bust for Mason in 2018, as he did receive a contract extension recently, but if there isn't a noticeable step forward in year 5, then Vanderbilt could look to make a change. So Fornelli's got Derek Mason on the hot seat here. Really?
Yeah.
Derek Mason?
Listen. This topic came up when I was talking to somebody like 2 weeks ago, and I was like, there's no way Derek Mason is on the hot seat. And then I started looking at it. Listen, the 2 years before Derek Mason got there and James Franklin, 9-4 records. Back-to-back bowl games.
Bear Bryant. I mean,
it is.
They're never going to have a James Franklin type coach.
But listen, I think James Franklin for Vanderbilt establishes a new norm. Then you flip around and get Derek Mason, 18-31 in 4 years, one bowl game, and you lost it.
No, that's the new. No.
That's the old norm, is what I'm saying.
No. If you take James Franklin out of the mix, Derek Mason's so much better than the typical Vanderbilt coach. It's not funny.
Well,
so much better.
I don't know. I mean, yeah, he's beaten Tennessee, but Tennessee's been terrible. He gets beat 59-0 by Alabama.
When was the last time before James Franklin Vanderbilt even went to a bowl game?
I think they went to 1 under Bobby Johnson. I think they went to 1. Might have lost it.
I feel like Derek Mason's not doing that bad of a job. As I've said before, I don't think they're going to be the worst team in the SEC.
I just think when you're Derek Mason and you're at a place like Vanderbilt, you have to build to something, and then you have to plateau and you have to hold it steady. You build in a certain direction. Maybe 8 wins is your ceiling at Vanderbilt. Maybe that's what you're trying to get back to. But you have to keep it steady around 8 wins. Derek Mason has not done that. He has not been very good.
But not everybody in the SEC can't win 8 games.
That's my point. Listen, Vanderbilt is not wrong for thinking they should strive for more. Now, James Franklin might have been their Bear Bryant, but like I said, I think it established a new norm for some of those people. They look at it and go, well, if James Franklin could do it, why are we settling for Derek Mason winning 4 games?
Tyler Mann says Vanderbilt needs more than a coaching change. They need a conference change. And at least in terms of staying competitive, maybe it'd be easier to be
We need our grad rates to stay up, all right?
Yeah, exactly.
Vanderbilt's got to stay. We'll vote somebody else out for
They bring the SAT average up for everybody else. But do you think any SEC coach in the hot seat this season?
I think that Ed Orgeron is going to be really, really hard pressed to stay out of job trouble by the end of the year.
But be careful how you say this, because I think you're with me on this. When you say job trouble by the end of the season, you don't mean he's going to get fired at the end of the season. I mean, they'd have to have a pretty bad record.
My point about it is this, and we've talked about this before. I have this angle on LSU that I hold LSU in such a high esteem. They moved on from Les Miles. They moved on from a coach who was perennially 9-3 after the regular season every year. This was a national championship winning coach. They didn't hire Ed Orgeron to come in there and get the 15th ranked recruiting class and lose Matt Canada after 1 year and start not being able to figure out a quarterback battle. I think it's a slippery slope for him. I think that He's got to understand that that job is held in high esteem. In 2 years on the job, you should be better than 8 wins. I think if he starts sliding to the 8 wins to the 7 win range, because they are going to struggle on offense this year, if he starts getting into that category, I wouldn't be shocked to see him out of a job. I think he fits in that category a lot like we didn't think Jim McElwain did before last year. No way he gets fired in year 3 after going to the SEC championship game back-to-back years. Well, guess what? That Florida job expects more than what Jim McElwain give him. I think LSU job is the same way. You just got to be careful. I'm not saying he's on the hot seat, and there are writers out there saying Orgeron's on the hot seat.
Yeah.
I'm just saying there is a point that I could see Ed Orgeron getting fired this year, and it's not that far out of the capability.
It is just really unusual that we're in a time in which normally you go into a season thinking there are 3 or 4 SEC coaches that could, have a tricky outcome. For the most part, this season you don't really have that. You can make the case for Orgeron, although I think it'd be really, really hard to see him exit the job after 2018. Mason, maybe Mark Stoops. That's about it.
Barry Odom's going to be fired after this year.
Yeah, Barry Odom's good. I almost forget about him.
Yeah, I didn't even bring it up because, obviously we don't have a ton of Missouri fans watching in the comment section, but Barry Odom's job is, listen, Josh Heupel's gone. Derek Dooley is running this, whatever he calls it, Wikipedia offense.
Right.
I don't love the marriage. I think Barry Odom's going to have a hard time.
Yeah, I think that's probably a fair point as well. All right, item number 9 here on our SEC Country Line First and 10 list, and this is a hot-button subject for me. I've warned about this before, this notion of legitimizing something that should remain illegitimate. So you're going to help me out with some of the story on this. So Alabama beats UCF in the women's NIT. Yeah. Is that what? First time women's NIT has come up as a topic here on SEC Country Live. So Alabama beats Mississippi State in the women's NIT, and Alabama Athletic Director Greg Byrne had a little fun with that. Here is what Byrne put out on Twitter about the Alabama win in the NIT for the ladies. He says, great win today over UCF for Alabama women's basketball. We're not ready to make it more than it was and schedule a Disney parade, but we'll definitely take it. #Roll Tide. This is the Alabama Athletic Director obviously making reference to UCF's sort of bogus national championship in the football claim and the parade they did have in Walt Disney World. Well, not missing any opportunity to get even a modicum of publicity for something, the UCF Athletic Director Danny White fires back on Twitter on that, saying to Greg Byrne, our policy has been to schedule Disney parades when we win New Year's Day bowl games. We've won 2 in the last 5 years. Most recent 2017 when we're the only undefeated team in America and national champions. If you want to have a parade for WNIT wins, more power to you. I actually like that there at the end from him on that. Why is the Alabama Athletic Director beefing with the UCF Athletic Director on Twitter? Yeah. This is so beneath him.
Beef down.
This is y'all, this is what beefing down is. When you're the Alabama AD, you should be so far up in the clouds that you can't even see down to where Danny White, the UCF AD, is. You're supposed to travel in an entirely different stratosphere, but Greg Byrne has essentially made UCF Alabama's equal through this. This is a huge blunder.
Yeah, I don't think there is a good way for there to be an outcome of what Greg Byrne did. Listen, you're going to be passive-aggressive in your tweet, and I understand what Greg Byrne's doing because, listen, a ton of people bring this up to him. Like, a lot of people talk about it. He's in charge of some of these scheduling. Hey, are you ever going to schedule UCF? They want to do a home and home, blah, blah. So I understand what he's doing, kind of poking fun at it. This has kind of been Greg Byrne's attitude as the Alabama AD. Kind of, he chimes in. He wants to be chummy. He's not like the old school Malmore, really diplomatic. He's younger. I mean, he's kind of got that vibe to him, so he understands Twitter. He understands how to kind of get after it in that way. But I agree with you. I don't like the look because all of a sudden it's, and everybody's on there kind of replying to the tweet like, yeah, UCF's in your head. UCF's in your I don't think UCF's in anybody's head, but it's going to appear that way anytime a guy like Alabama's AD, makes a comment like that.
On Facebook, Michael Cooper says UCF is just troll college. This is why you can't do that. And I'm not offended by it. I'm just saying it's bad strategy because, as you said, when you first write this tweet out, if you're Greg Byrne, you're like, hey, this is funny. I'm going to get some laughs. I'm going to get some retweets. And you feel like you're doing what you're supposed to do, but you're only empowering someone who can only be famous by you acknowledging them.
Yeah, I agree.
UCF is nothing. They're nobody unless they get acknowledged by Alabama. They couldn't even keep their coach, But once Alabama starts sort of paying attention to what UCF is saying, now we're having a debate. Yeah. Now we're having a negotiation.
And we're doing exactly what they want.
You've essentially legitimized the other side here.
Yeah. I hate it either way. And listen. When we first initially started talking about this, somebody made the comment, man, Alabama fans are mad. UCF's in their head, Alabama fans are mad. And my comment was, nobody cares. Alabama's celebrating the national championship. They're doing their own parade right now at Bryant-Denny Stadium. They've got the crystal ball and, the new college football playoff trophy. They don't care about UCF. This is what makes it relevant, though, for UCF fans, and this is what they love about it. It makes it feel like they're actually in this conversation.
RJ Rain says everyone doing what UCF wants by keeping talking about them. That's so true, because this notion that they are the national champions, I forget if it was you that said this or somebody said this, the national champions, where's the trophy?
Right.
If you're national champions, show me the trophy that you won for this. Their only trophy is Greg Byrne tweeting about it.
Yeah,
That's the only trophy they got.
It was actually Damian Harris, I think, tweeting about halftime of the Pro Bowl. Wasn't he? They were out there at halftime of the Pro Bowl. It was raining, and he goes, man, that's a fire picture. Where's y'all's trophy at?
Yeah, that's what it was. That's right, yeah.
And I thought that was funny. But I'm telling you right now, we're into March. Spring practice is starting. UCF has a new head coach. I don't love it from Greg Byrne. I understand what he's trying to do. I think Greg Byrne approaches these situations the right way, where he's young. He understands, this new kind of era of college football, but I don't love what he said.
On Facebook, or I should say YouTube, Tyler Mann says Mike UCF's in Auburn's head. There is a funny sort of like Iron Bowl subplot to this, where if you're Alabama, you're looking at Auburn like, you can't even do this right.
Yeah.
You can't even do this right.
I think there's a subplot involving Georgia, too, because UCF always points to, well, Auburn beat Georgia and Alabama, and blah, blah, blah. It just, to me, it's worthless. It's worthless to talk about. The UCF team isn't going to be anything this year. I think they won 3 games.
Over on YouTube as well, Cliff Nelson, who's over there today, Shannon Burgess, all talking about beef down. I'm telling you, that was I'm so surprised that none of y'all had heard that phrase before. I feel like I had a lot of people who've used that phrase. Trust me, I'm not traveling in these like cool lingo circles. I mean, not a lot of my friends know a lot of lingo. I can promise you that.
It kind of makes me mad though that you didn't come up with that, because I'd be like, man, we invented a phrase on SC Country Live. It's beef down. You don't ever beef down to your competition.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's what we. I wish it was mine to invent. All right, let me do item number 10. Speaking of Auburn, here on our SEC Country Live first and 10 list. So, at the risk of talking about basketball, this is one of those things you got to mention, though. Auburn got killed.
Yeah.
Like they were down 40 at one point in time to Clemson.
Boy, I can't talk a lot of noise because Bama looked like that against Villanova. I don't know if you caught that game. Like there was a point where literally I think Villanova could have gone like this and the ball would have gone in. It was absolutely terrible, but I expected more out of Auburn, I guess. I mean, you're talking about the SEC regular season champs. I would think you would go down making more noise than they did against Clemson, but boy, Tiger versus Tiger crime right there. They took it to him.
So let me deal with a couple of issues here. First of all, I thought in one of the most classless moves I've ever seen. Did you see former Auburn coach Tony Barbie, who on Twitter, now we don't know for sure what this is, but the assumption by everybody on the internet is that the sort of laughing, crying emoji there is Barbie having some fun by the fact that Auburn's losing so bad to Clemson. Barbie's now a Kentucky assistant. This is a guy that Bruce Pearl stuck his neck out for when these two teams played, said, hey, y'all don't be rude to Tony Barbie. First of all, I didn't like it at the time. I thought the Auburn fans had a right not to like this guy. Come to find out, there may be a lot of justifiable reasons why they don't like him. What a jerk Tony Barbie must be, who was a disaster as a head coach. Now from the vantage point of being an assistant coach, he's going to mock Auburn for losing. Essentially not being able to do something that he himself wasn't able to do either. This Auburn team got a lot farther than that team ever did. What a low-class individual Tony Barbie must be.
I don't know how much respect I had for Tony Barbie before this, but boy, it has hit the floor. It has hit the floor, and listen, this is coming from a Georgia and Alabama guy talking about getting Auburn's fans back on this, but you're right. It was as low class as it comes. You're talking about kids that just fought their heart out, had an incredible year, hit heights that Auburn basketball hasn't been to in years, that Tony Barbie wasn't able to take them to, and all of a sudden he wants to cast stones on Twitter and have this, put the emoji out there like people are going to be cryptic about it, like they don't know what he's talking about. I thought it was terrible. I thought it was a terrible look for him.
And then a more serious subject here, the future of Bruce Pearl. Pearl was asked about that on Sunday. Here's what Bruce Pearl said about his own coaching future there at Auburn. He says, I'm Auburn's basketball coach. I'm blessed and happy to be Auburn's basketball coach. I want to stay at Auburn. I've got to say, all season long, I feel very good about the position we're in. The process we've gone through, and my anticipation is that I'll be Auburn's basketball coach. There are a lot of people who are not quite so sure about that. Obviously, no one really knows what to make of this, NCAA, FBI stuff. I mean, you can't really put 70 teams on probation. It could be that Auburn just sort of gets lost in the shuffle with all these other programs kind of dealing with some of the same kind of stuff here. But if you're an Auburn fan and you like what Bruce Pearl did this season up until the bad loss to Clemson, are you concerned about Pearl's future right now?
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough because there's a lot of waters to navigate here. We're talking about an Auburn situation or an athletic department that has a new AD. If I'm not mistaken, they're kind of dealing with all these things. They got the guy down from Buffalo, I believe it was, to become the new AD. So a lot of situations make, and this is not just an NCAA deal or an SEC deal. I mean, the FBI is involved in some of these things going on out there, and it feels like every time we turn a corner, some more news comes out about this. And like you said, we don't know what the future holds as far as this situation goes, but a lot of decisions to be made. And I think Auburn fans, for the most part, really want to have Bruce Pearls back and want to welcome him back next year as a coach.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of folks will tell you when that Auburn gym was rocking this season, was really loud. A lot of fan support they got behind this team, and now they wonder what's next. And is there going to be a sort of a second chapter to what was a great season for Auburn here in 2017-2018? Brandon Adams, that's Mike Johnson. It's always great to have you with us here on SEC Country Live. And we're always looking to close the show the same way as we're on the search for champions of life. Today it comes from the SEC and from the NCAA tournament. You mentioned Alabama getting walloped by Villanova. That game also includes a strange moment here for the Alabama mascot. Is it Big Al?
Big Al.
Yeah. So Big Al, the video is captured of Al, and he's kind of crawling on the ground here. I'm assuming that Al was trying to do a worm, but
this is, I think you call this...
The uniform is too heavy?
You call this the inchworm, I believe. This is the inchworm, the slow-moving, hey, pull my feet up and put... Listen, and evidently...
This is so weird.
I know, and evidently he's done this a couple times at Coleman Coliseum over in Tuscaloosa. I don't know what he's trying to get done, but I actually kind of think it's funny.
So this is what he tried to do? He executed what he attempted to do here?
Yes, this is not a failed worm attempt. This is him doing what is called the inchworm. And I have no idea what he's going for. I have no idea at what point of the game this is. I'm assuming it's some kind of halftime or
there is
timeout.
Something low-key creepy about how slowly he's moving across the
But
floor.
I low-key laughed when I saw it. I'm not going to lie. I was like, what is this guy doing? Mark Burnett put out a tweet about it.
It's kind of transfixing.
It actually was pretty hilarious because I think for me, and he's done this a couple times, but for me, this captured my feeling during the game. They're like losing by 25 points, and he looks like he's just trying to crawl away from the scene of an accident. Like, let me get the heck out of here.
All right, speaking of the scenes of an accident, we'll let you get away from this one today. We'll be back tomorrow, though, at 3 p.m. We'd love to see you all once again. Of course, in between time, you can check out our podcast. We'll have it up for you on Apple Podcasts and SoundCloud coming up right away. We'd love to have you share the show with your friends on both YouTube and on Facebook. Let them know that we're talking about the SEC every afternoon here on SEC Country Live. It's going to be back with you. Looking forward to more tomorrow, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, for another episode of SEC Country Live.